for the wood, what I've used is 18mm MDF, which is 3/4 inch, and that is 8 foot by 4 foot, which is 2400 by 1220, and the battens here, which are 3/4 by 1.5 inch, which is 18mm by 34mm. And see, it ends up being doing a good job. And what that's used for is, if I place the side cabinet down, as you can see, it's for marking out where all of the parts go and everything just hangs off them, and it's really good. One thing to note though is how much wood you need depends on the size of your cabinet. Mine is going to be about 1.85 meters tall, which is about 6 foot, and it's going to be 660 wide for the internal, which is as in the control panel, plus the width of the MDF on the outside. So 660 is, if you give is about 25 inches, and I think that was a good size to have 2 joysticks, 6 buttons for each of the 2 players, and possibly a trackball in the middle. The cabinet isn't as deep as a lot of them, and what it is it's actually 730. Sorry, oh, okay, sorry, I'm back. Yep. So 730 is from the left edge all the way to the outside edge of the control panel, which I think, according to my calculations on the calculator, is 28 inches. Sorry, my use of inches is not as good as it used to be. The width of the edge of this cabinet here to the outside edge is 150mm, which is 6 inches, and what that does is it gives me a control panel for the joysticks and everything of 660mm by 33 centimeters, which is about 13 inches deep and whatever the 660 was wide, which is really a quite nice size. Okay, so what I did was I worked out I needed 3 sheets of the 8x4 MDF, and when I went to the wood shop to get the wood, I asked them to cut the wood, so I got them to cut 2 of the lengths at 730 and 1 of them at 660. And what that meant was I knew that the size of this wood here was exactly the right size for both, yeah, and all I had to do was cut around the inside. And similarly for the 660 length, that meant all I had to do for each of the parts of the control panel and the kickboard and the marquee and everything else was just to cut the right height, and that meant the widths were perfect, and you can just screw everything together and you know there's going to be no gaps visible, and you don't have to do any more cutting, and it fits really well. Okay. What we're going to do now is cut the first side of the cabinet, which is the first job that we need to do. And obviously I've built my cabinet already, so what I'll be doing is interspersing the video with screenshots from my blog. Now let's just pretend this is the 730 wide bit of MDF, yeah, 3/4, it's a really nice size. Okay, and we take our drawing here, and what we do is we transfer onto this drawing an outline of the shape that we want. Okay, here's the finished side of one of them with all of the supports fitted on. When you're marking out, what's probably best to do is, rather than measuring with the ruler all the time, use a gauge. So for example, for the way I want to do my cabinet is I wanted a gap at the front, so when the cabinet went in we had about that much of a gap in the front. Similarly all around the outside there was an 18mm gap. Okay, so to do that I just marked out 18mm with my block of wood and put the markers on, and then did it again, and then we had our straight edge all the way up to mark out. And for this side with the back buttons, I just wanted a little bit showing for some reason, not really sure why, and that ended up being 21mm. As you can see, there's a little bit of a gap. Okay. For the marquee, I just wanted a little bit showing on the top, and when the glass came down I just wanted a little bit showing. As you can see, all of the lines are where I could, they are 18mm, so that this is for the bottom marquee. This one here is for the speaker cabinet. Okay. For the bottom, I do a little bit of a calculation because I've got some wheels which I only want to show about 5mm, which is that much. So I calculated that the size of the MDF was 18mm, and add to that the size of the wooden batten and the wheels, and to leave a 5mm gap I needed 63mm, which is this height. Okay, which we'll see when we fit it together. Okay, so that was the measurements. Now for the actual cutting, for all of these straight edges, what I did, you know, obviously I'm not a carpenter, I used my straight edges, which was either a bit of wood or it was I think I used some metal sheeting because it's a bit truer than wood, because wood can be slightly warped. I clamped it down on the side and used the jigsaw for the straight edges, and then cut a little bit short here, and then got the router, not the router, sorry, the jigsaw, and did the curves. And then for the straight edges I clamped the wood along the edge again, did the straight edge short of the curve, then use the router again. Okay. For this bit, what I actually did was I just cut it straight, and then I used the jigsaw afterwards to get the curve in. Now these curves aren't perfect by any means, but you can feel them being rough when you go around. I know a lot of people use routers with to cut like circles, so you work out for each circle what your diameter is, and then you can route it out, but I didn't do that. Okay, so then once it's all cut and sanded, you then just simply place the other piece of wood below this, and then you draw around with a pencil and then cut it out, and you should have something similar. And then obviously if you don't, then you get your sander or your plane, or if you've got a spoke shave, which is like a plane on two bars, but like handlebars, and then you can curve it round nicely, and you just get it as good as you can. Putting all the buttons on, I numbered them all. That was so that I could easily remember where they were, and I can put them on the drawings. this bit of wood here is for the back. This is for the drawer. The drawer is right in the middle. It's not a very elegant drawer, but it does me. This is to hold the control panel in. Okay. These two are, that's for the screen, the glass. This is for the monitor. This is to hold the speaker in, because the speaker goes up here, and sorry, the speaker grill, which I'm just using 18mm MDF, and inside of here goes my speakers, which gives me about 4 inches to have. Okay, so when screwing the screws in, I used my marking gauge to find the centre, and that just let me put the marks in right in the middle. And you don't, obviously didn't have to put a middle in, but I like to do that. And you have them all nicely spaced out, all of the screws. And what I also did was I followed the lines through for each of the screws, so that when I was putting the back on, I knew exactly where the screws were, so I didn't end up going through them. Okay. As you can see here, there's a hole here, which is where the screws go, because I knew that was the end of the cabinet. Okay. The first thing I made was the base with the wheels. Now if you ignore the wheels for now, as you can see, it is exactly 660 wide, and that is using one of the bits of wood that I got cut for 660, and the depth is just over 52. It was actually 522mm, which is about 20.5 inches. The reason for that size is on the cabinet it measured where the wood went and where it needs to finish, and that was the size. Okay. So using my marking gauge, which you can see I've got half size, I drilled parted holes all around, and obviously you can see I've countersunk them. Okay. And that was nicely evenly spaced, because I figured the base is going to take all of the weight of the cabinet, so it's got to be strong. Right, with them countersunk holes done, I put on the battens around the edge. You can see the long ways, yeah, and they were screwed in underneath. But actually, when I was drilling the holes on either side, these were already in place, so I could drill all the way through. And what you got to make sure is you don't drill all the way through the wood, just in case you're going the other direction, you might end up going through the MDF. So as it happens on mine, when I put the drill bit in, it only actually went to 3/4, which was just the right size. So then that was these screwed in. Then I measured where I roughly wanted the wheels to go, and I just used some offcuts of MDF from where I cut out this cabinet. Okay. Yep. And that then formed the basis of the base. Now, as you can see, with my 63mm height, which I mentioned before, that is where I started the batten for the back, so that when it goes together, the base touches this and it's just the right height all the way across.